This is the purpose and need. Every time we complete an environmental impact statement, we start out with the purpose and the need and what it's for. And so the proclamations identify objects and values which were required to maintain and protect. And the proper language is to provide protection for the proper care and management of those objects and antiquities. So those were both identified in both proclamations. And then also to provide a comprehensive framework for the BLM and Forest Service to manage multiple uses. As we get into the environmental impact statement, there was 4 alternatives that the BLM always starts with. And the first alternative there, the no action alternative. The no action alternative really represents the conditions on the ground now, or the actions that are in the current land use plans. In our case, that was 2008. So the Monticello land use plan was signed in 2008. So any decisions that made land use plan allocations in 2008 would be the no action for what we're currently operating under. And for the Forest Service, that was the 1986 Manti-LaSalle National Resource Management Plan, right?
It's forest plan.
Forest plan?
Commonly called, yeah.
Okay. Alternative B, this alternative would prohibit certain uses that may conflict with management of objects and values, and would identify areas for additional long-term protections of resource values within the planning area. Alternative C emphasizes an adaptive management approach to protecting long-term stability of the monuments, objects, and values, while also providing for recreational access and other multiple uses.
I have a question.
Yep.
I've seen that term, adaptive management. I don't know what that means.
Great question. Adaptive management is where the agencies would take a look at, so would make certain allocation decisions, and then as we go along, we would monitor conditions out on the ground. And through that monitoring, we would adapt and change over time as needed in order to react to the conditions out on the ground. So that we're still protecting the objects and values. If we needed to adjust something, that would be adjusted over time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, alternative C and D, what would you say, I mean, in your words, what would you say the biggest differences are there as you guys kind of frame these?
So alternative D has the most flexibility with the fewest restrictions. Alternative C has a few more restrictions and a little more adaptive management here. There's a little bit less adaptive management in the preferred alternative D. Alternative D also makes a lot of the future, trying to think of the right, it asks us to take a look at future planning. So we'll get into it here in a couple other slides. So where more activity level planning can take place later on. So we're only dealing with allocation decisions. And it's a technical term in the NEPA stages where we're going to be making allocation decisions and not really getting into the weeds of activity level planning decisions. And so the preferred alternative D, well, all of these alternatives does that to a certain extent, really, to where we're going to be deferring some decisions for later on. And basically, this is the umbrella document, overall arching document where we'll be looking at the major land use plan allocations. But really the difference, the main difference is going to be fewer restrictions here.
Hey, Lance.
Yes.
Just a question for clarification. As we go about through the different categories of fire management and cultural artifacts, and, in theory, we could say, you know, we actually, as a group, maybe we like alternative D better for one of those, but maybe we like alternative B or C better for a different category. Is that right? So we're not selecting, we're not giving input necessarily on we prefer this alternative for everything. We might want something that's slightly more restrictive in one category and something that's a little bit more flexible in another category. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep. So as an advisory committee, you can make it those kind of recommendations or suggestions to the agency. And Lisa here's got a flip chart that we want to kind of capture too. As you think of things that you might think, oh, that's a topic where maybe we ought to make the recommendation tomorrow morning to the agencies. Maybe just let her capture, be it whatever that resource is, and then tomorrow morning we'll start out with that and go, okay, these are the resources you want to know more information about, and it might also help frame our discussion for tomorrow. Ed?
I just want to make sure on your question, you have the ability to mix and match and make what you think is the best recommendation for that resource for that area. But it has to have been covered in our draft plan and draft EIS, or we would have to supplement the work. So if you all came up with something new, we would need to have an administrative process that would accommodate that. And I just want to make sure you're clear on that. If let's say on one alternative for rights of way, we say that we would allow certain rights of ways in a particular area under one alternative. Under another alternative, we would limit those rights of ways in that area. You could suggest that one of those two, or the no action, but you couldn't. If we haven't covered completely closed, then we would have to do some additional environmental work.
I think that makes sense. So just to be clear, some of the alternatives have a lot more prescription built into them than others, right? So some of them just talk about sort of, but some when you talk about rights of way, it's very specific in terms of which roads would be closed and which would. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. Some of them it's like visitation to particular areas, numbers, things like that, or whether an area is a special recreation management area, has a designation. You could pick from those things that we've analyzed, and we can, Lance, Gary, Becky can express that if there's an area where we think that we might be walking into an area where we have to supplement.
Right.
You mentioned, thank you, the Monticello, is it Monticello R&P or something like that?
Yes.
Does that actually have an expiration to it, or is it like a 20-year plan or something like that?
It doesn't have an expiration date to it. Typically, a lot of our plans, we can do planned maintenance on them. We generally plan for 20+ years on a land use plan until we end up modifying it.
Were you a part of that process also? Or?
So I wasn't here at the time. Gary, I think, spent a little bit of time.
I was there.
That was 2008.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that will be our option, essentially, it's no option.
It's the no action. What Ed was talking about is the range of alternatives. So if we had talked about 0 visitors or 50 visitors, you could go between 0 and 50. But if you said, oh, we think you gotta have 150, I'd be like, whoa, we didn't analyze that. And all of the allocations are that way. We have a range of alternatives. And generally, in planning, you try to present a wide range of alternatives from the kind of a conservation to a development scenario in one sense. Thank you.